All right, everyone. It's been a minute since I've gone live, but I want to make a post about how history repeats itself with respect to the psychology of patients as they approach expanders, specifically with respect to the psychology of wanting to like tooth-borne expanders because of what I've called the less invasive fallacy, which is something that I discuss in my ebook. Actually, it's for a future chapter. But essentially, this phenomenon is the result of people having success with tooth-borne expanders early on in their treatment, and they get super excited about that, and then they start posting about it online, only for months later for them to find out that these tooth-borne expanders are actually causing serious dental issues, alveolar bone loss, gum loss, root resorption. The periodontal issues that arise with tooth-borne expanders come later on, after these online posters have already shared months of supposedly positive outcomes from their tooth-borne expanders. By that time, they've roped in dozens of people into said treatments, only for them to then disappear once they find out that they didn't get the result that they wanted, or that they did gain tongue space, but only as a result of flaring out teeth, because these expanders simply push on teeth. So I'm going to jump into a screen share to a post that was on Facebook today that someone brought my attention to. And it comes from the Craniofacial Action Group. What up, Al Boyne, and what up, Rudy? Actually, Ruby. So let's check out this post from the Craniofacial Action Group. So this guy, Shannon Johnston, who, by the way, seems like an awesome dude, reminds me a lot of myself back in the day, where he just wants to share his experience with the BioBlock, which is this acrylic and metal appliance right here that has a jack screw in it. By the way, I did an appliance that was almost identical to this, so I've literally been through this exact experience before. Shannon has started a school community where you can sign up for $4 a period. I think it's $4 a month to monitor his progress with this tooth-borne expander. And the vibe that you get from Shannon's school page, maybe I can share this instead. So here's Shannon's page. The vibe you get is that he is liking what he's getting so far with the BioBlock. I think he's a couple of months into treatment. I'm not sure exactly how far into treatment he is, but I built this community to provide information about my journey to help improve jaw development, discomfort, TMD, airway, posture, tongue position, and mewing, brain fog. He is expecting this BioBlock to solve all of these problems for him. You have a before photo. Of course, we don't have an after photo, because the after photo will probably never come, because generally what people find with these expanders is that after they go through, a year of pushing on the teeth, all that they end up with is flared teeth and subsequent periodontal issues. So, of course, we don't actually have an after photo, which one of the commenters brought to Shannon's attention. Hey, why don't you wait until you finish with your treatment before rallying a bunch of people into the BioBlock? The BioBlock may be appropriate for children, but of course, when you push on adult teeth, as I said before, all you get is tooth flaring. So let's go back to the Facebook group real quick and see some of the activity that's been happening in here regarding this post. So I came in, I chimed in, history repeats itself. How do I mean by that? Well, I had this same exact expander before. Dr. Kent Lawson provided me with an expander that was almost identical to this. He called it the sagittal expander. I posted about it online. Initially, my experience with tooth-borne expansion was positive, but after several months of pushing on my teeth, I realized that there was, the apparent tongue space that I was gaining was not bona fide bone growth. There was no actual alveolar bone growth. Actually, there was alveolar bone loss. There was no growth at the mid-palatal suture at all. It was just tipping of teeth. History repeats itself in the sense that, this reminds me of me when I first started my tooth-borne expansion. I believed strongly in it and wanted to share that news with the world. Of course, the difference being that back then when I started in 2016, 2017, sharing the information about my own tooth-borne expansion, there was really no robust body of work debunking tooth-borne expansion. Of course, now we have Jaw Hacks, which debunks tooth-borne expanders. My interviews with several doctors who all unanimously agree that tooth-borne expansion is bullshit. We have several Facebook groups that do the same, that exist solely for the purpose of warning people against using appliances like this. And so we have a gentleman here named Rich Barton who is warning this kid of, please do not rope people into this treatment until you finish and see if you're actually going to get what you want, because user experience over the past 5 or 6 years has been that, people are not getting what they want out of these appliances. So let me stop sharing for a second and rant a little bit about what I call the less invasive fallacy. So the less invasive fallacy is a logical error that people make when they approach adult jaw expansion. The fallacy says that tooth-borne expansion is less invasive than skeletal expansion, such as MARPE, MSE, and certainly less invasive than jaw surgery, which of course is risky and brutal. And so you're better off doing a tooth-borne expander because it's less invasive. But the reality is that tooth-borne expansion is actually more invasive than skeletal expanders and then a well-executed jaw surgery with a good qualified surgeon who has, consistent record of good results. So why are tooth-borne expanders actually more invasive, even though on the surface they seem less invasive? Well, because when you put outward orthodontic force on teeth, you destroy them. You set them on you give them a death sentence, essentially. Breaking bone, such as what occurs with skeletal expanders like MARPE that split the mid-palatal suture, and jaw surgery in which bone is actually severed off, moved forward, and plated, in a sense, that's a kind of natural anatomical process. The body is built to deal with fractures, which is essentially what MARPE is and what jaw surgery is. It's a kind of fracturing of the bone. You create a fracture, and then the body has the ability to fill in that fracture with new bone, such as when you break your arm and then you cast it. 6 months later, your arm is good as new, more or less. The body does not have an equivalent mechanism for dealing with expansive orthodontic forces. The way the body reacts to outward orthodontic force is resorption of bone, essentially. The body thinks that, okay, there's something pushing this tooth out. We have to get rid of the bone that's preventing it from moving out. And that's what happens. The alveolar bone on the outside of the tooth, on the buccal side, which is the cheek side of the direction that the tooth is being expanded, resorbs. And because orthodontic force is totally unnatural, not to be found in nature in any meaningful way, the body also responds by the tooth sort of dying. You get root resorption of the tooth and you get gum loss. So tooth-borne expansion is more invasive, not less invasive than jaw surgery and MARPE. Hence, we have the less invasive fallacy. So we have a really good question here from Goku Trades. If you are against tooth-borne expansion, why did you get SFOT? So I've often referred to SFOT as responsible tooth-borne expansion, because if you're going to expand teeth, at the very least, you can buy yourself some bonus points by doing SFOT. What does SFOT do? First of all, it adds bone on the buccal side of where the teeth are being expanded into. In other words, we admit that when we push the teeth out, the bone isn't going to magically grow itself where we're trying to put the teeth. Okay, so we actually have to intervene and put the bone there ourselves. Secondly, what else does SFOT do? It involves corticotomies. We flap the gums. The gums are flapped, okay, here. And cuts are made between each tooth carefully so as to avoid hitting the roots of the teeth with the dentist's tools when those corticotomies are made. What the corticotomy does is it reduces resistance of the body to the dental movement of those teeth with SFOT, so that you get less root resorption, less bone loss, less gum loss, because the body is, so to speak, biologically activated to allow that tooth movement to occur. Of course, we never see SFOT being recommended with tooth-borne expanders like BioBlock, HomeoBlock, AGA, ALF, DNA, because, well, SFOT would be too invasive. It would be brutal. It would be surgical. And those treatment modalities tend to come with a kind of woo-woo, holistic health, biological, epigenetic sort of propaganda that goes along with them that rejects all forms of cutting and surgery. So, in a sense, they're too ideological to admit what's actually needed to make those treatment modalities slightly safer and slightly more effective, which would be SFOT. Let me see another comment here from MD. I have been for a couple of jaw surgery consultations, and they keep saying I need teeth removed. Is this often the case, or should I push back against this advice? Kind of a different topic for a different day. I'm not even going to get into that right now, but sometimes extractions are called for prior to jaw surgery, such as on the lower jaw. If you want to really move it forward, sometimes they extract premolars on the lower jaw just to actually sort of shorten the dentition of the lower jaw so that they can advance it even more forward. More on topic, Ruby HD. Why does tooth-borne expansion work in children? Okay, so first of all, it works better in children, but even in children now, we're seeing more MARPI being done. In other words, you could say that there's a consensus forming amongst MARPI providing orthodontists that even in young children, it's better to just split the suture with a MARPI than it is to sort of mangle teeth with tooth-borne expanders, even though those tooth-borne expanders in children can split the suture, because, of course, in children, the suture is much softer. Whereas in adults, let's say, I don't know, anyone over the age of 10 or 11, that suture is fused. It becomes concrete rather than clay. So children are just softer, and they can be actually have disruption of the mid-palatal suture, which is exactly what MARPI does, by using the teeth as levers on the other end of the tooth-borne expanders. Another great comment from Nicholas Bowens. John Mew and Sandra Khan talk about BioBlock as an effective treatment modality in adults. So I like John. I like Sandra. I've interviewed both of them. I respect them to death. I think there's a lot of good that comes from their work, but I just disagree with them on this. And I think that the evidence is not in their favor. I don't think we have conclusive, published cone beam scans that demonstrate that tooth-borne expanders in adults can increase the size of the maxillary bone. And there's been a tremendous amount of controversy about this, where we have misinterpreted scans that are being used to demonstrate the efficacy of tooth-borne expansion in adults, when in reality, when you take a more critical look at the scans that are being put forth as evidence, what we're finding is that, for example, they're comparing and contrasting intermolar width at the premolars in the before scan, and then at the first molars in the after scan, and other sort of radiological sleights of hand such as that make it appear that tooth-borne expanders are creating bona fide skeletal change in adults. So I would say, if tooth-borne expansion is effective in adults, show me the scans. Show me the scans. Post a link to the radiology that demonstrates this, because I have not seen it. And in the many groups that I'm involved in on Discord and on Facebook and on Reddit, etc., it's never been produced. And in the major AGA lawsuits that are, mentioned prominently on mainstream media, CBS, NBC, et cetera, those scans were never produced as evidence by the defense. The plaintiffs demanded that those scans be produced to back the scientific claims that were being made about AGA, and they never appeared. So, in other words, it's claims being made without scientific backing. Okay, let me hit the comments once again. So I just want to go back to the post on this to show you guys, like, it's a recurring psychology that occurs with these patients that are going through the honeymoon phase of treatment, which is to say the phase of tooth-borne expansion treatment where things are going well, where they haven't really realized yet that tremendous periodontal damage has been done. Let me see if I can find the quote that I was looking for. Okay, so a few other things that I want to call your attention to. Let me go ahead and share this again. Share screen, craniofacial action group, share. So Rich Barton is pressing this guy, cautioning him to maybe wait until he gets some positive benefit from his treatment. I'm sorry, wait until his treatment is finished before promoting it online for others to go into. And Shannon says, well, Rich, I appreciate your concern, but we have proof that these tooth-borne expanders can open the airway. Now, the reality is that what's happening when tooth-borne expanders open the pharyngeal airway, first of all, there's a few things. You can't really use CBCT to be a judge of what's happening in an airway exclusively, because the angle of the neck in the CBCT makes a huge difference on how the airway appears on the CBCT. So, for example, if you take the scan like this with your chin tucked, the airway is going to appear closed. But if you go like this and jut your chin forward, now the airway is open. So it's very easy to get bad data from CBCTs regarding airway because of that postural issue. And I believe Rich links to that somewhere. The other thing is that when we use radiological evidence that these tooth-borne expanders increase the size of the airway, oftentimes what's happening is that these tooth-borne expanders are flaring the upper teeth, and that's allowing the mandible to slide forward. In other words, the mandible is simply reposturing forward to take advantage of that space created by the upper front teeth being flared open. The barn doors are being open and the lower jaw is sliding forward. But this isn't actually growth that's occurring to open up the airway. This is flaring of the upper front teeth and the resulting reposturing of the lower jaw, which is not actually sustainable. For example, oftentimes what we were seeing in tooth-borne expanders was that the front teeth were being pushed so far forward that the mandible was reposturing too far forward so that it was dislocated out of the temporomandibular joint in a position that was wholly unsustainable. And this was creating that platypus aesthetic that we were seeing AGA patients get, where their front teeth were literally like parallel to the earth almost, and their lower jaw was coming way forward, but not in a way that was sustainable. So in a sense, it's kind of fake progress. Of course, those patients later discover that their front teeth are so incredibly compromised that it's not really worth it to gain this reposturing of the lower jaw at the expense of having their upper teeth permanently damaged. I mean, sure, you could have your upper front teeth removed, and that would allow your lower jaw to slide forward, to infinity. But is that what you want to do? Do you want to have your upper front teeth extracted just so that you can slide your lower jaw forward? No, obviously that's not a desirable approach to treatment. Let's see what's going on in the comments. I guess that will end my rant on, let me just close my rant by saying this. This guy, Shannon, seems like a great guy. I'm sure his intentions are pure. I don't blame him at all for putting his content behind a paywall, such as what he's doing on Skool. If you're good at something, don't do it for free, right? The issue is that, Shannon, I've seen this phenomenon before. I've seen people get really excited about the early stages of their tooth-borne expansion and want to promote it online, only to later realize that the treatment is not at all what they expected. So I would urge you to consider what Rich has said to you in the comments of that Facebook post, and walk yourself back from the ledge and consider holding off until you finish your treatment before promoting it online and roping others into it. Okay. That's the end of that rant. Now let me get back to the questions. I'll answer a few of these before I sign off for the day. I will start at the top here. How does the reverse pull face mask work? Should I move the teeth or the maxilla forward? Well, the reverse pull face mask works by anchoring to a MARPI, which is a skeletally borne appliance. It's screwed into the roof of your mouth here, and then the reverse pull headgear attaches to that bone anchored appliance, which means that when the elastics pull on that, it's actually pulling on the bone rather than the teeth. I would never advocate that an adult wear a reverse pull headgear that's attached directly to the teeth without an additional bone anchor, because that's just going to cause dental movement, such as the kind that I've cautioned against in the first 20 minutes of this video. Mike Mew likes MSE. That's a good point. So one of the big things that people do to argue in favor of tooth-borne expanders like the BioBlock that this gentleman Shannon is promoting is they say, well, Ma John Mew said it's good, or Ma Mike Mew said it's great. And of course, the whole mewing community holds John and Mike up as esteemed figures, and rightly so. I have tons of respect for both of them for many reasons. For example, for putting this stuff on the map and for promoting the idea that environmental factors lead to facial underdevelopment, which I wholeheartedly agree with. I think it's a mix of environment and genetics, but I think I really praise John and Mike for even putting the discussion on the table around environmental factors. I love them for that. I disagree with the idea that tooth-borne expansion is appropriate in adults. And this gentleman points out that Mike Mew is treating patients with MSE. So even Mike himself, Dr. Mew himself, at least Dr. Mew Jr., is now using skeletal expansion in adults, which to my mind is an admission that that is a superior treatment modality when it comes to getting expansion in adults. Do you still suggest Isa Chamile? Yes, I do. I like Isa Chamile. I think she's a great woman, and I've seen good results come out of her office. She's also very affordable as compared to some of the other prominent providers in Europe. For example, Chris Moschik is billing out at like 16,000 euro, whereas if you just go a little bit further east to Istanbul, Isa Chamile is treating patients for sub 10,000 US. So for patients on a budget, Isa Chamile is worth a shot. And, you know, if you ever want to hedge your bet on MARPI and on a MARPI provider, just go in with the mentality that you're going to not go too crazy with expansion. Just be moderate. Don't expand a centimeter. Take 4 or 5 millimeters of bona fide expansion and be happy with it, because the risk for bad MSE treatment increases dramatically, let's say after 7 millimeters. That's when asymmetries, overexpansion, balloon face, and other major issues that we've seen with MARPI arise. They tend to happen on the back half of expansion. So just, you know, too much of a good thing is too much of a good thing. You can always hedge your bet with a MARPI provider by not expanding too much. But yes, I love Isa Chamile, and I would love to have her on for another interview to talk about child rearing, because, you know, I have a 7-month-old baby now, and I've been, you know, we've been breastfeeding for 7 months, and I have so many things I'd like to discuss with her about that. Would you recommend MSE for aesthetics alone based on everything you know now? Sometimes. Sometimes. There are particular faces that are very deficient in the arch and very deficient in the midface. And in patients like that, a moderate MSE expansion can provide a very nice subtle angularity to the midface and a nice broadening of the upper arch to get a better first impression that you make with the smile and a better closed lip profile with the more prominent cheekbones. Of course, aesthetics go haywire with MARPE when, like I was just saying, you go too far with it. I don't know if I've ever seen a centimeter of MARPE expansion look good, for example. That's just too much, right? If you expand the upper a centimeter and you don't expand the lower skeletally at all, that's just a recipe for disharmony and asymmetry, balloon face. So moderation, again, is key when it comes to MARPE for aesthetics. Let's see what else we have here. What do I think of people who do jaw surgery or MSE just for aesthetics? Let's focus on the jaw surgery thing just for aesthetics. So it's impossible not to get a health benefit from jaw surgery, more or less, because to get an aesthetic jaw surgery, you have to make the airway bigger. But if we're talking a patient that is purely like has no symptoms, zero sleep disordered breathing, excellent nasal breathing ability, the ability to mew all night, zero AHI. And if they just want to do jaw surgery to look different, to be honest, I've never actually seen a case like that. Every patient that I've ever seen that has wanted jaw surgery has had some functional deficiency and has gotten or would stand to get some functional benefit from doing jaw surgery. But hypothetically speaking, if such a patient were to exist, I mean, if it's done by a qualified surgeon who agrees to take that patient on, and that patient can afford it, I wouldn't do it for aesthetics only, just because I believe that there's so much more that you can do to become more attractive besides having such a major surgery done. I probably wouldn't do it, but I don't think it's totally insane. I think the key is to just make sure you choose the right surgeon in order to minimize the risk of anything bad happening. And then if you're willing to go through the pain and suffering, and if the surgeon is willing to operate on you, I mean, go for it. Any functional benefit for SFOT and expansion? SFOT and expansion can be used to correct malocclusions. For example, like after a MARPE, if the upper jaw has been expanded skeletally and the lower jaw is lacking, you can get your bite back by doing SFOT on the lower. If you do SFOT on the upper, you can gain a little bit of tongue space, but it's going to have no impact on the nasal breathing. SFOT expansion is not nasomaxillary expansion such as you get with MSE. So the functional benefits are going to be limited to oral benefits such as, correcting malocclusion and increasing tongue space to pull the tongue out of your throat and open up your pharyngeal airway, make mewing a little bit more comfortable. But I'm not too crazy about SFOT, to be honest with you. I'm not a fan of dental expansion, if you haven't noticed, even with SFOT. I think obviously if you're going to do dental expansion, better do it with SFOT than without it. But even then, there's better options. Have I seen MSE and face mask work in females in their mid-30s to fix class 3? Yes, I have. If you're committed enough with the MSE and with the face mask use and you're compliant, definitely 30 is not too late to get skeletal change with the face mask, especially for a class 3, which really those are the only patients that I consider candidates for a face mask are class 3s. Because I think that the biggest challenge with MSE and face mask is a kind of psychological one, where wearing the face mask really sucks. It's hideous, it's uncomfortable, and I think it would just drive you crazy to just wear a face mask without any discrete destination of where you're trying to pull to. If your upper and lower jaw are in a good bite and you're just pulling your upper jaw into God knows where, that would drive me nuts, because it's like, well, how much longer do I have to wear this thing for? Or do I just wear it 18 hours a day for the next 6 months and just, hope I get some kind of meaningful expansion? That would drive me nuts. I mean, I lasted 2 weeks with the face mask in that situation. Compliance is the big problem with face mask. But if you have a class 3 and okay, I just need to get 2 more millimeters, and then my upper front teeth will be in front of my lower front teeth, and I'll have a good bite again. And you can see the progress being made. You can say, okay, it's been 2 months I've been wearing this face mask, and I've already gained, a half millimeter or whatever. I've got another millimeter to go. That gives you a destination, and it calms you down a little bit and makes it seem like there's light at the end of the tunnel. What's your opinion on BioBlock Stage 1 and HomeoBlock? That was the first 20 minutes of this video. I would say I'm not interested in those appliances at all for adults. How many millimeters can you expand forward with SFOT? I don't know, but not much, man. I mean, so you're talking forward dental expansion. That means interiorizing the upper front teeth. I mean, not a desirable approach to begin with. I would say the best number to expand forward dentally is 0, but how much can be feasibly achieved relatively safely? I don't know, 2 millimeters max. But that's just kind of me pulling a number out of my ass. But I would say 2 to 3 millimeters, and you should seriously be pumping the brakes and, questioning whether or not you want to go any more than that. And I don't even know, who you would really do that with. I know Dr. Yousefian has the tapes procedure that he does, where he does interiorizing of the upper front teeth using the MSC as a bone anchor to push the upper front teeth forward after having done after having done SFOT to sort of loosen the butter of those upper front teeth and give them some bone to protect them through that advancement. I haven't seen any results from tapes, but I do trust Dr. Yousefian. So if he's doing it, presumably it's relatively safe, but I would say there's definitely a cap as to how far forward you can go with that. My opinion on Paul Kociancic losing his license, I don't have an opinion. I don't know anything about that situation, but I do know this. I'm not one to jump and join a lynch mob. The fact that Paul had his license taken away, I'm not just going to stand here and throw stones at him because everyone else is. I like Paul. I don't agree with him on everything he says. Obviously, in my last Jawcast episode with Paul, I disagreed with his whole belief toward environmental causes of malocclusion. But that doesn't mean I'm going to contribute to the assassination of Paul's character. No, in fact, I would like to have Paul on and give him a chance to give his side of the story, because I wouldn't want people to just, destroy me online without really knowing what happened, without giving me a chance to speak my own side. So maybe Paul will have to come on sometime and give his side of the story. I think he's earned that. Has he been perfect with every patient? Supposedly not. But is he brilliant and qualified enough to deserve a chance to have a trial, so to speak? Yeah, definitely. I mean, Paul is a mad genius, man. I mean, look at some of his ideas with jaw surgery. Look at IMDO. The stuff is brilliant, and you can never take that away from him. $4K custom MARP is $4,000 for custom MARPy cheap for Turkey? That's cheap anywhere, but does that include the orthodontic component of treatment? If it does, then that's a steal. But again, orthodontic treatment in adults is not something that you want to cheap out on. If you're getting a provider at that price who has never done it before, it's not worth it. You're better off taking a year or two and saving up enough money to work with a provider that's done hundreds of cases to ensure that you don't have a problem with your expansion, because this stuff is very tricky. Do I know about orbital box osteotomy? It's not only jaw surgery that can make good faces. You can change the eyes, the IPD, the interpupillary distance. That's the distance between your eyes. That can be changed with the orbital box osteotomy. Yeah, so this is that treatment that the gentleman who runs the channel Giant Implants was promoting on Instagram. It's definitely intriguing, but I don't know much about it. I watched the video. It was scary as hell for sure, but all jaw surgery is scary. Am I going to write it off and say it's bullshit? No. I would love to have Giant Implants on my channel and give him a chance to explain it, because I acknowledge that looks maxing is a thing and that people want to know if there's treatment modalities out there that can alter different components of their facial aesthetics, not just the jaws up to the zygomas, but also up into the eyes. So I'm curious. I would like to learn more about it. But I would also say, don't just accept it blindly and run off and do it until we've seen, as many cases as possible come out the other side and the long-term results of those cases. One recurring theme in the jaw hack space is that a new treatment comes out, everyone jumps on the bandwagon, it ends up being a train wreck, and then everyone is like, oh, fuck, I fucked up, and now I'm all messed up. So let's just maybe pause and wait for some more people to come out the other side from the orbital box osteotomy. Hi, Ron. I started ALF therapy and things are going well. Nasal breathing a lot better. Hoping for expansion by end of treatment. What are my thoughts on ALF? Yeah, man, I've seen plenty of people happy with ALF in the first year of treatment. Again, you're getting tongue space. It's allowing you to pull your tongue out of your pharyngeal airway because you're flaring your upper teeth. That is having a positive domino effect on your airway because now maybe you're nasal breathing more because your pharyngeal airway is less blocked. You're sleeping better, so on and so forth. But I would say to you, where does this lead? Are you just going to keep tipping your teeth ad infinitum? And after your teeth are tipped, what's going to happen when you bring those teeth back into an occlusion? Are you just going to round trip them and bring them back into an upright position? Aren't you just going to lose all of that oral volume that you spent a year and a half and a bunch of money trying to achieve in the first place? So again, with ALF, you have to seriously watch out for that honeymoon phase of treatment where things seem really good, but you haven't really logically thought about where does this end and how is this doctor going to bring this to a finish. We sort of put blind faith in our providers of tooth-borne expanders and just trust that there's some magical solution to how it's all going to come together in the end. But that's not generally the case with tooth-borne expansion. Those expansions just tend to fall apart, after 1 or 2 years, and then patients end up unsatisfied, not having their underlying pain point resolved, and then seeking, skeletal options at that point. Is there any dental procedure that increases under eye support, eliminates tear troughs, potentially reduce scleral show? Dude, getting changes around your eyes is tough. The one thing I can say is that the best way I know to approach the eyes is through a MARPE, because the MARPE creates change to the zygomas. And if you can alter these bones, those are the ones that are closest in proximity to the eyes. So that's your best chance of pulling this skin a little tauter and resolving some sagginess under the eyes. Is it a perfect solution? Definitely not. But that's as close as apparently we can get to improving the aesthetics of the eyes. Obviously, Giant Implants has his modified orbital box osteotomy, or whatever he calls it. That's a more direct approach to dealing with the eyes. But again, totally unvetted option that I certainly cannot vouch for, but would love to have Giant Implants on to make his case for that. About face mask, after I grow my maxilla forward, what do I do about the mandible? Exactly. Will I have a severe overjet? Yes, exactly. This is why this is such an insightful comment, and it's so simple and such common sense, and yet the high IQ people that are drawn to this space tend not to think about that. It's like, if you're just going to pull the maxilla forward with face mask, where does that leave the mandible? The mandible just can't slide forward to infinity. It's limited by the TMJs. You might have 1 or 2 millimeters of play inside of your TMJs, especially if your mandible is recessed to begin with. But if people want 4 or 5 millimeters of forward advancement with face mask, your mandible can't slide forward that much. It's going to come right out of the TMJ, and the mandible certainly won't grow. It's not the ramus is not actually going to get longer as you pull the maxilla forward with face mask. So I just don't believe that face mask is a good option for people who aren't in an underbite. If your bite is like this and your maxilla is set back, sure, do a MARPE and a face mask to pull the maxilla to the point where it's just in front of your lower jaw. Then you have a destination. Then the lower jaw will actually serve as a stabilizer for the upper jaw in its new advanced position. But to just pull it forward when you're already in a good bite is, to me, it's the epitome of idiocy in this space. What do I think of NCR therapy? So NCR is when, I don't know much about it, but I know it involves putting balloons in your nose and inflating them as a way of trying to open up the nasal airway, I guess. I don't like it. I remember talking to a guy a couple of years ago who did NCR, and it ended up seriously damaging bones in there and actually creating a maxillary cant by pushing one side of his maxilla down. So he broke a bone that caused his maxilla to tilt. And I just remember thinking to myself, who the hell would ever want to just shove a balloon blindly into such a delicate crevice as your nose, hoping to get some sort of positive outcome out of that? To me, it's just too risky. I like seeing where I'm working. In your opinion, would you recommend maxillary and mandible expansion with devices before going for surgical options? Super nuanced question. The short answer is I generally recommend MARPE before jaw surgery for patients with distinctly poor nasal breathing, or for patients that want some midfacial expansion prior to jaw surgery because they have a really flat midface. So aesthetically, if you have flat cheekbones, you may want to pop those out a little bit with a MARPE before going in for jaw surgery, because jaw surgery occurs beneath the zygomas. Okay, jaw surgery cuts occur right here. And the zygomas, which are these bony projections that are very important for facial aesthetics, they do not get affected by the Lefort cuts involved in jaw surgery. So if you want to impact these, you have to do it with a MARPE or artificially with some sort of implant. And then I would say functionally, like I said before, if you have really poor nasal breathing, if your nose is stuffed all the time, you might want to use nasomaxillary expansion via MARPE to just impact the nasal floor like this before doing the jaw surgery, because the jaw surgery, again, it's going to have some positive benefit for your nasal breathing, but not as much as a well-executed MARPE. But do I think MARPE is overdone for patients that are definitely going to do jaw surgery? Potentially. That's certainly the opinion of LA Comms and many other jaw surgeons, is that for a lot of patients, they get a lot better bang for their buck going right into jaw surgery. All right. My voice is getting hoarse, so I'll probably take 1 or 2 more and then sign off. Damn. A lot more here, though. Didn't Aisha Chamile say she has a way to move the mandible forward after face mask to a patient who started with a good bite? I mean, she could have said it, but I don't know what that would be. I mean, you can dentally get the bite forward using SFOT, but the only way to advance the lower jaw forward without dislocating it out of the TMJ is with BSSO cuts, which they do in double jaw surgery. That means cutting the lower jaw here and here, sliding this part of it forward, and then plating it forward. There's no magical, also IMDO, which is essentially a kind of slow, steady BSSO that's achieved with an appliance rather than a one-time surgery where it's just plated forward. IMDO is the solution to slide the lower jaw forward. In other words, without doing a BSSO, there's no other way to do it. Ultimate OSA treatment. Yikes. Okay, in a nutshell, a really nice nasomaxillary expansion, followed by a really nice double jaw surgery, followed by potentially a soft tissue nasal surgery to get you some final touches inside of the nose to clear that out a little bit more if necessary. And then maybe a tongue tie release with a couple months of myofunctional therapy. Okay? Because establishing the form is one thing, but then you still need to have the good function. And what all of that gets you is guaranteed good nasal breathing, because you can have the biggest jaws in the world, but if you're not breathing through your nose, it's all going to relapse. So that's my ultimate OSA treatment in a nutshell. But of course, every patient is different, and the best way to approach dealing with OSA is trying to understand, okay, where is this patient kinked? What's causing this person's airway deficiency? Because not every patient needs nasomaxillary expansion. I would add one more thing. Anyone trying to deal with OSA needs to be mindful of sleep position. You can put a massive dent in your OSA sometimes just by getting out of supine position. Incline your bed, sleep on your side. Otherwise, don't face up when you're sleeping, and that can have a massively positive benefit on OSA. So it's a matter of altering your form through jaw augmentation procedures, and then altering your lifestyle via via myofunctional therapy and experimenting with sleep position, and then other lifestyle changes that can improve your sleep, such as, good sleep hygiene, diet, exercise, mental health. It's very complex. Oh, man, I'm running out of steam here. Any complications from expansion after having a septoplasty? In other words, does a nasomaxillary expansion not mix well with a septoplasty that has been done first? Supposedly, but if the nasomaxillary expansion causes some problem related to the prior septoplasty, you could always just go back in for a second septoplasty or a second nasal surgery to fix that. Although I would point you to my discussion with Coral Tao, the ENT, who explained to me that sometimes when septoplasties are done, they shave too much bone off of the nasal septum, and that then when the nasomaxillary expansion occurs, the septum sort of just collapses, if I remember correctly what she said. So that could be a more catastrophic issue. The short answer to your question is yes, potentially, but it doesn't seem to be a huge deal, especially if the septoplasty was done well. But of course, I'll just add the best approach to combining nasomaxillary expansion and soft tissue nasal surgeries such as septoplasties and turbinate reductions, etc., is to do the nasomaxillary expansion first, because if the nasomaxillary expansion is a home run, sometimes it negates the need for doing any soft tissue nasal surgeries. So always better to do nasomaxillary expansion than to go in and start putting lasers or scalpels inside of the very delicate tissues in your nose. But sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes you need both. Sometimes you need nasomaxillary expansion, then double jaw surgery, then soft tissue nasal surgeries. So every patient has to be taken case by case, but generally speaking, that's the chronology. Nasomaxillary expansion first, then soft tissue nasal surgeries. Ethan Thomas. Dr. Yousefian confirmed 1 to 3 millimeter mandibular increased length from MSDO. We'll see if it sticks. Not an alternative to BSSO. Okay, very interesting comment, Ethan. And I think this gets to a very interesting question, which is, does skeletal expansion advance your maxilla and also mandible? But let's take them one at a time. Or does it actually make them shorter? Because we have this phenomenon that people complain about where when the maxilla is expanded with nasomaxillary expansion, the diastema that forms at the front can function almost like a quicksand, where the midface, or at least your upper lip, sinks into it, giving the appearance that your maxilla has almost recessed. But then we also had the conventional wisdom around MARPE, which was that because MARPE is always a kind of Pac-Man expansion, which is to say it's not a perfect parallel expansion, but it's always to some degree more anterior and conical. Does that flare out the maxilla so that you get some sort of maxillary advancement as a result of MARPE? I don't know. That's something we need to figure out this year, I think, on jaw hacks. So, but to get to Ethan's point, when we do MSDO, which is sort of skeletal expansion of the mandible, where we cut the mandibular symphysis, which is the midline of the mandible, put an expander and then crank that open, similar to MSE, but for the lower jaw, Ethan is telling us that he did, I don't know if he got a 1 to 3 millimeter mandibular lengthening from that. I believe Ethan did have MSDO. Maybe he can chime in the comments. But if MSDO does, in fact, lengthen the mandible from this flaring process, right, from opening it up like this and therefore moving it forward in space a couple of millimeters, that could be interesting. And that's, again, like Ethan is saying, not an alternative to BSSO, but 1 to 3 millimeters is a hell of a lot more than nothing. I've always said that jaw hacking is a game of millimeters. Ethan, great OSA optimization approach. Thank you, buddy. You know the game as well as anyone, so a compliment from you means a lot. Okay, here's an interesting one. Can you recommend somebody in London, England? So for what? For jaw hacking in general, for expansion? The short answer to your question is England and Canada are not great places for expansion. They're both super conservative. Doctors there are reluctant to do skeletal expansion. So I do have some names of English providers. I could pull some up for you. I can't personally vouch for any of these people, but I'm just going to put these names on your radar. Stefan Decker, Steffen space Decker, Decker. He, I know, trained with Ilya Lipkin, supposedly. Sunil Hirani, Sunil space Hirani. And Mary Lowe, Mary space Lo. All of these people are known MARPE providers. I can't, again, vouch for them. I don't know if they'll take you on as a patient, but I do know that they do provide skeletal expansion. At least they did as of, this past year when I had other people tell me about them. But I will tell you as well that most of the people I talk to in England travel for expansion. They either go to Chris Moschik in Germany or Danielle Cantarella in Italy or Ayse Chamile in Turkey. These other providers are much more, I don't want to say aggressive, but they're much more, they're much less reserved in their use of these appliances. Okay. I'm going to unpin this comment, hide. Oh, man. All right. Give me a second to catch my breath here. I should have brought a drink up with me. All right. Just one more pure value add. Can you recommend someone in UAE? I might be able to. Let me check my database, UAE. So I'm just going to refer to my Dubai providers for you. Okay. Not UAE, but this is as close as I can get you. Ayman Obeid, Ayman space Obeid. Supposedly he does MARPE. Dr. Tina Rokadia, Tina space Rokadia. And I'll give you one more, Dr. Hakim Al-Geriani, Al space Gherini, Iani. Okay. Notable mention, Dr. Fadi Kufash, Khuffash. Supposedly he's very knowledgeable in airway and posture. And Dr. Anil, Anil. Okay, those are my leads for that part of the world. The gentleman who's asking about Saudi doctors, I'll refer you to that list I just provided. They're in Dubai, and that's as close as you're going to get. Okay, Sokayashi, Germany. I will also hook you up with another name or two from Germany. Okay, how about Benedict Wilms? Wilmes. He's in Dusseldorf, Germany, and supposedly is an MSE provider. Could be an alternative to Christoph Molchik. And then also one more, Dr. Gerhard Polzar, Polzar. Supposedly, here's an interesting one. Supposedly, he refers out to a gentleman named Dr. Boettger, Boettger, who does MSDO also in Germany. So could be something worth looking into if you're looking for some expansion in Germany and are not wanting to work with Chris Moschik for whatever reason. You're welcome, Sokayashi. What site did you use to find these doctors? All right, I'll tell you. There's no site. There's no one database where people can go to find these doctors. I offer a service where I do one-on-one consultation chat coaching sessions with people, and I do them every Sunday. And I talk to people all over the world every Sunday, and they tell me that usually these people are highly intelligent, brilliant people who have done a lot of their own research. They give me the names of the doctors that they found through their own research. I add them to my database, and that's how I get my information. So, a big part of the value that I think I bring to YouTube and to people in my one-on-one chats is my network that I've put together through my one-on-one coaching service that I've been doing for 6 years now. So I do believe I have the best database in the world for this stuff. And it's totally unique, and it's available to anyone who, unfortunately, there's no way I can simply share the whole database because it's in the form of Apple Notes. But for specific questions, just reach out and I'll hook you up. All right, my voice is gone. And I'm going to check out. But as we reach 2 hours, I just want to reiterate the original purpose of this video, which was to caution people from falling victim to the less invasive fallacy, which is the idea that tooth-borne expansion is less invasive because it does not involve surgery, when in reality it's more invasive because putting expansive orthodontic forces on teeth is almost always destructive. The body has no natural way of dealing with it, and that actually breaking bone, while it seems more invasive because there's bone cutting and saws and blood involved and general anesthesia, while it seems more invasive, it's actually less invasive because the body does have an innate ability to deal with fractures, such as when you break your arm. The body fills in the fracture with new bone and you move on with your life after that, as good as new. So lastly, the honeymoon phase of treatment with tooth-borne expanders, where it seems like this tooth-borne expansion is going well for the first year and change, but then all of a sudden you realize, wait, maybe I wasn't getting the benefit that I thought I was getting. Maybe my maxilla isn't really growing. And then you start having tooth pain. You start realizing your teeth are flared. You go get an independent opinion from a periodontist or another orthodontist who tells you your teeth are being wrecked. And then you're like, holy shit, this past year, all I was getting was increased oral volume from flaring out my teeth. And now I have permanent damage to my teeth and I need bone grafting just to fix my teeth and buy them some life back. So be very careful with tooth-borne expansion. And if you want to know more about that, I have an upcoming chapter in my book about tooth-borne expansion. So you can learn more about that there. By the way, my book is available on Substack. Just do a search for Substack, Jaw Hacks, one word, and you can find me there. All right, everyone. I wish I could keep this going because you seem to have a good conversation happening in the comments. I would say anyone who wants to keep the conversation going, check out my Substack. Link in the description of all my videos to my Discord, where the conversation can keep going from there. Just under 1 hour. I'm going to check out. Peace out, everyone.